I am Andree Duggan of the Lafayette Historical Oral History Project, talking with James Rossi on Friday, June 11th, 2021. Welcome, James, and I need to ask you if you could tell us your full name and the spelling.
James Stephen Rossi. James Stephen, everybody knows how to spell it. Rossi.
And is that Stephen with a V or a PH?
V.
Great. Do you have a nickname?
No, Jim.
Jim.
Yeah,
That was my dad's name.
Yeah.
When and where were you born?
I was born at Alta Bates Hospital in Alameda, 1949.
Okay. How long have you lived in Lafayette?
I lived in Lafayette from about 1950, 51, and basically till I went away to college, back and forth, in the late 60s. So I didn't, after that, I really didn't live in Lafayette, but my parents still lived there, same house.
Is this the same house that's been in the family for a long time?
Well, no, not my grandfather's. This is the house that my father built on Angelo Street. And when the property was subdivided, my grandfather gave each son a lot, 2 lots on Rossi Street for my uncles Frank and Serafino, and the next street north is Angelo Street, and that was for my dad because he had to go to World War II, so my grandfather thought he would name the street after him and, of course, give him the lot there.
That's great. What are the street addresses, the specific numbers of these homes?
Well, let's see. Ours is 3384 Angelo Street. Uncle Serafino's was 3384 Rossi Street. And the one on the end, I'm not quite sure what his address was. It was way down at the end of Rossi Street. Not way. These streets aren't that big. It's now. I went to school with a fellow named Joseph Schnitzler, and his son bought the Rossi house down at the end of Rossi Street. And kind of an interesting thing the way it happened. And the old tractor, the 1932 cleat tractor, was housed at Uncle Frank's house, and they asked if they could leave it there. It was just out getting rusty, so I guess it's still there.
That's great.
Yeah.
How long do you think it's been there?
Well, let's see. My Uncle Frank passed away, I'd say about around 2003, I want to say, somewhere in there. So, and it hadn't been run in a long time. So it's probably, they stopped disking their acreage and everything a long time ago. It's probably been there probably at least 30 something years.
Sure. Tell me a little bit about the backstory of your family and the farm. The one, well, I'm just going to let you tell the story. I think this is your first oral history project, isn't this, with the town?
Yes.
Well, why don't you tell us the story in your own words of the farm?
Now, I know you have a history from my grandfather and grandmother and my mother and father, although that one was 2013, wasn't it not?
That's right. But I think since this is an oral history piece, I don't think there's a problem with repeating any of that.
Okay, well, there's a little bit, and that was the last year of his life, and he wasn't that well to begin with. So, a couple of things when I read the article again, I'm going, there's a few things that aren't quite right here. And not by writing it down, it's just probably because my dad just didn't remember. And now going back to 1906 is when my grandfather came over between '06 and '07 from Italy. And he was 16 years old. I think he had $17 in his pocket. And he started working in a candy factory for about a year till he got his bearings. And then came out to Lafayette because there's some Italian landowners, Giglionis, Brazzonis, that were already out there farming. And he hooked up with, I believe, first Giglioni, and was basically sharecropping for him. And what that meant in those days is basically, say you got an acre or two of property, and he'd hire my grandfather to tend to all the vegetables, and he would the owner would buy the seed, and once they grew all the vegetables and brought them to market, the money was split in half. So what he did is he was pretty frugal with his money, and he started buying property from above Ed Rowland's place up Reliez Valley Road, from Ed Rowland, who owned he was probably the first individual in Reliez Valley. The land was very fertile up there, and he knew it. Not clay or anything like that, just really good dirt and good growing areas. So we're about, I'd say a mile up from Pleasant Hill Road on Reliez Valley. And that's where you see one of the photos of the second house that he built in the barn, which there's nothing around it as far as the picture you can see. And you can see a faint road in the back. Are you looking at the same picture?
Yes, he's with his family, and it looks like there's.
Well, this is just the house. No people in it.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's taken far away. It's the original. It's the first house that my grandfather built that actually had running water and inside plumbing. And that's probably down.
And your grandfather was Angelo?
No, Serafino.
Serafino. So
right. There's a Serafino Jr. and that's my dad's brother. Frank, Angelo, and Serafino Jr. were all brothers.
Okay.
And let's see. So that house, there was one before that had no running water or anything that he built, but that was just time being. So once he went back over to Italy to get Mary, his wife, my grandmother, married her, and whether she liked it or not, she became basically that's what they did in those days. They just got up and worked one way or another on the ranch. She tended the chickens, and they always had about 1-2 cows that they'd fatten up for the market and take to, believe it or not, in those days it was still around, was Lawrence Meat Market in Walnut Creek. And they had them butchered. So they'd live off 1 cow a year, basically. So anyway, they, through the teens, my grandfather stopped working for somebody else, and he had enough property to start his own little ranch. I think he started with 15 acres, and then by the time he was done, he had about 158. One report says 152, one says 158. I saw one was 189. I go, I guess that's, who knows. But I've heard 158 for years. So he'd do all his planting and did all his crops. They had a plow horse, and then they had the way they got to market was, since there was no tunnel, they had to take the cart and the horse, and that is in one of the pictures I have in there. And they had to go up and over Fish Ranch Road. So my grandfather would leave at midnight to get there at 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is this the same horse that did the plowing?
I believe so. He did. His horses weren't riding horses. They were working horses. As a matter of fact, my Uncle Frank laughed one day because I was hearing him talking at a dinner table, family dinners. He said, "Yeah, well, Frank tried to ride one once, and my grandfather got pretty pissed off at him, and of course the horse bucked him right off because he wasn't a riding horse; he was a working horse."
It sounds like he did his fair share of work with the 150 odd acres. What kinds of crops did your grandfather grow there?
Peaches, pears. He was really noted for his pears in that area. Plums, apricots, figs, grapes. On the hillside, let's see, I think there's a picture of the water tower that he built and the well. And above that, I don't know if I can find the picture here, but yeah, here it is. It's from April 13th, which shows his first house without running water. And the next picture down was the water tank, well, and then the pump. And then above that, you can see the vineyards. And this was right where Hillside Terrace is right now. And his eventual house was right to the right of that picture, the last house he built.
Now, with the water tower, was that for irrigation or for animals? What did he use that for?
It was mainly, it was gravity fed to the house. Mm-hmm. And that's how they got running water. And then he started putting in for and irrigation as well, but he did a few wells around the property just to be closer.
Yeah.
But this one actually, because it was higher, actually got running water right down to the house.
Well, he sounds very industrious and clever.
He was extremely clever, they say. And word was, when he got going, if you don't know how to do anything, word around town was, go see Serafino Rossi, because he'll know. Because in those days, they didn't have a lot of plumbers, electricians, and carpenters and everything hanging around Lafayette. There weren't that many people. So you better be able to do everything yourself.
So interesting. Why do you think he came to California?
I think one of his brothers. He had a couple of brothers that came out here. And, I think he heard that there was, number one, there's a lot of territory and land to be had. It wasn't very, there weren't that many people around. Plus the land and the climate was great for growing. And so he said, he had to take, of course, the train from Ellis Island or New York or wherever he landed. It's Ellis Island, I'm sure. and then take the train over. But we had relatives around the Oakland area.
Okay.
So that's how he kind of got to that area. And he heard it was pretty nice.
And
But,
then, and then
16
and then your father grew up on that farm?
yes. All three of the boys, Uncle Frank, let's see, he was born about 1916. Uncle Serafino about 1918, and Angelo, my dad, 1920.
When they all three of the children attended area schools here, and Angelo graduated from Acalanes in 1941, and then was drafted into the 27th Infantry Division in World War II.
Right.
And then he came back after the war?
Yes. As soon as it was over, and they all took they went to Lafayette Grammar School first off, and my grandmother didn't start the kids until they were a little older, and we don't really know why that was, and perhaps it's because she wanted to make sure they knew English better, because first when they were first born and everything was all Italian, and then they said, well, we got to get you to learn English. Both my grandparents were they knew enough English to get along and, become citizens and everything, but it was very broken English, and a lot of words in there interjected with Italian. So it was pretty tough on the kids, and not much different than today's Mexican Americans. And they came over and they talking,
Sure,
the language, and anybody else, whether it be German or, any of the minorities came over, they're always speaking their native language first. So they started a little late, and once they started going to high school, it had to be Mount Diablo because that was the only one around. So they took the train to get there. I think it was the northern southern, or southern northern, whatever it was. Came in through Lafayette. And then Acalanes, which we just mentioned, was built in 1940. So he started school then. And then that first graduating class was 41. So getting back to what you just asked me, yeah, he was at what was he doing? He was welding. My dad was welding in the shipyard, and he got called to action and drafted.
Was that the shipyard down in Richmond?
It's either Richmond or Martinez or something. I think it was Richmond. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he had to go in the Army, and my other two uncles got deferred, one for farming and the other for flat feet.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess that was a big deal back then.
Well, Angelo, your father, sounds as though he was a bit of a war hero.
Yes. And he the first thing is, let's see, I think it was Saipan was the first one he was on, in the invasion of Saipan, and then the invasion of Okinawa. So he got wounded on both of them. And as a matter of fact, I made a little note that, and I sent the letter in one of the pictures. If you got a letter and your son was in the war, that was a good thing. That means that he was still alive. And if they drove up to your house in a vehicle, that was a bad thing.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So if you got the letters, that means that he was wounded. Mm-hmm. And which he was. So there was two letters that my grandfather received.
And he received a Bronze Star and 2 Purple Hearts.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And he had a lot of other. He was a staff sergeant, and like he said, hey, in those days, once you were a private and you're still alive, you went up the ranks pretty quick if you had anything on the ball. So he became a staff sergeant, and he had a machine gun patrol of 5 guys, including himself.
How did Wow.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
How did you were going to say something?
Oh, well, I was just looking at your mother and wondering how they met and what they were together 56 years in the house.
Yeah, they met in Oakland at I think Sweet's Ballroom, and which was a big dance hall, I guess, back in those days. And I guess every kid around would, by kid, I guess teenagers that could drive would go down to Sweet's, and they met. And then unfortunately, my grandmother washed his shirt and washed the phone number for my mom with it.
Oh.
So he never saw her again for about a year. And then they touched base again. I think they were at a Frank Sinatra might have played there or something like that. And they met again, and I'm sure she gave him hell, and he explained to her what happened, because they didn't have any way of communicating very well.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, they met, and right after that, of course, he got shipped out. And so they, communicated whatever they could through the mail. And, he made it out of the war, came back, started working for her father, my grandfather, Antonio Bertero, on the market in San Leandro, Oakland. And he was working for them. And then at the time, that was about 1945. Then they got married, of course, right away. Built a house in Ashland at the time. This is prior to the Lafayette. And then my 2 uncles started the furniture business in the shed, or the barn, that barn that's in that picture.
Okay.
And then when my grandfather started subdividing, selling off all the property, he ended up buying a few lots in Lafayette, and he built 2 cinder block buildings. One which he gave the eventual Rossi brothers to have their business, and the other one, which was just down the street. As a matter of, we sold that in 2019, and that was Diablo Auto Parts was in there, and then Napa Auto Parts for 30 years or so.
Interesting.
We just sold that building, or I did, and my 2 cousins were also a third owner of the Frank's daughter and Serafino's daughter.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So they asked him basically to come and work with them, which he said, yeah. And they had already earmarked a lot, which he started building in around 1949, 1950. And I was born in 1949. So I guess I was a little over 1 year old when we moved to the Reliez Valley address on Angelo Street.
Okay.
right around 1950, 51. And the shop, uh, basically what they did is and this is, really stopped making furniture early on, right off the bat, because that wasn't cost effective. You can work like crazy for a month on a project and you wouldn't get much money. But what was lucrative was refinishing, repairing furniture and antiques. So the business really became not a furniture selling shop, but a refinishing and repair shop. And that's what it stayed until 1977, 78.
Now, is that the one that was on Mount Diablo Boulevard near the Park Hotel?
Right next to Sun Valley Lumber, and then Park Hotel bought that whole area there. And it was right next to, well, the building's still there. And that was where I worked on my summer jobs a lot of the time, sanding furniture. And going out on deliveries with my uncle because he didn't want to lift everything by himself. So,
what are some of the family memories of Lafayette, what it used to be like?
Pretty sparse. There wasn't a whole lot going on in Lafayette, especially for three teenage boys. So as soon as one got their license, they would, and that was, close to around the time they installed the tunnels, 1936. So you figure Frank, he was probably 19, 20 years old, and 2 years. So they started going to movies and things like that. They didn't really do a hell of a lot in Lafayette, to be honest with you.
You had mentioned that the horses were working horses. Was there any interest with riding horses in town?
For them?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
They were, like you said, they were farm animals, and they were so tired from working on the farm half the time because my grandfather never let them go out for sports unless it was a standalone type of sport like track and field and stuff like that. No team sports because that would take up too much time. So, and they could always run, so they were all runners, and good too, very good, because they're all tall. They're all 6'2" and on 150 to 175 pounds. So they're very athletic. And my dad finally, he let him in his senior year at Acalanes. He let him go out for football. The only problem is they found out he just had turned 19. So in those days, if you were in high school and 19, you couldn't play. So he ended up, he couldn't play football.
I see.
But he wanted to do really bad because of Norm Van Brocklin was from Acalanes as well.
Now, how about you? When you were growing up, did you have siblings?
No, I'm the only child.
Okay. What are your memories of Lafayette?
Well, yeah, memories of Lafayette was before Highway 24 came in, which was 1956. We used to go into, La Rosa's Market is kind of smack dab in almost like the middle where the freeway was there, the first one. And you go in there and you go into town. I can't remember if it was Lewis Market or La Fiesta Meats, and La Fiesta Square was there, and La Fiesta was where they used to shop all the time. La Fiesta Market, which is kind of where, let's see, Geez, it would be right where, well, you know where Lafayette Square is.
Right.
And you turn in, there's a restaurant, there's a little pizza place now on the corner there. But that whole bank of, new stores, that was kind of all Lafayette Foods. Not a big market, small market.
Sure.
My memories were going down to the drugstore on the corner, which Lafayette Pharmacy, and they had a fountain. It's now Starbucks. And of course, that was a hot spot for me to go to and kids, because you could go and get your cherry Coke and a grilled cheese sandwich, and it was probably a quarter or something back then, and then go back home. But that was really the only, other than the homes that were starting to be built all over. And then it started to grow right in the 50s there, and basically it started growing after they put the freeway in. In 56, because every professional person wanted their kids to be raised out in the country, not in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So they all started coming out to Lafayette, Walnut Creek, Moraga, Orinda.
So
Lafayette, pretty sleepy little town.
So you were a teenager in the 60s, I guess.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And do you remember the Park Theater?
Yes, I do. And that was around early on, because the matinees on Saturday were great. I mean, there was always like 3 shows, and all the kids I went to school with were all there. And that was a big deal back then. Hey, we're going to go to the show and see Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, or whatever it was. And then there was 2 or 3 others as well. Yeah, it was nice, and the theater was good. I mean, we ended up going to the Park Theater all the way through high school, but then the new Ream was built. It was always the Orinda, Lafayette, and El Rey and Walnut Creek is the ones we visited until the Ream went in, and then that was the big deal, because they had seats that rocked. Wow. Yeah.
Now, when you look back on your family history, do you ever have any inkling to garden or farm?
Not farming, but garden. I still like to plant herbs and vegetables. My wife does most of the gardening. She likes to put her flowers going and everything. My grandmother, around the houses, my grandmother was the one that really liked to put flowers in, and she was pretty good at it. Her houses had an abundance of flowers, and annuals or whatever you call
it.
Yeah, and her herb garden was huge. It was probably, oh my goodness, it was probably about at least like a couple of 100 square feet.
Wow.
And she had carrots and all the little stuff there, basil, of course, rosemary, and anything that they used in her cooking. And it grew. There was like, nowadays you can't get a basil to grow worth a darn, but in those days it was like a bush. And so yeah, she did all that stuff.
And now, is that Mary you're talking about?
Yes. And I would go, since it was real close to our house too, I would go up all the time and get the vegetables, because my grandfather kept, when he sold everything else, he kept 4 acres and built the house up on Hillside Terrace there. which was just up from Reliez Valley. And the house is still there. Not sure who owns it now, but it's when you go up Hillside, it's the first turn off to the right. And his vegetable garden is straight ahead to the right, where there's a big house there now. So people that bought it from my dad and his brothers, when they sold it, subdivided it all up and got 4 lots out of it. So they sold them off and destroyed the property.
Oh.
Yeah. It was nice because,
yeah.
We had every Friday, my dad and brothers used to drive up there on their way home, and my grandmother used to give them a box or a bag full of fresh vegetables, fruit, and a tureen of minestrone soup that she always made on Friday.
Wow. That's delicious.
Oh, it was. And, that's, every Friday they did that. And everything was so close, it didn't take much time, but she had it all wrapped and packaged and ready to go. So that continued all the way through there. It was, I used to be able to go up to my grandfather's house, and he taught me how to shoot his rifles and everything. And I was able to go, where Silverdale is?
Mm-hmm.
I was able to walk over there and shoot the guns freely. And I was only about 8, 9 years old at the time, but
wow.
a little different back then. There wasn't any house past La Campanita, El Sombro.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a big hill. Now, my grandfather was going to buy a property. There was about 15, 20 acres in Silverdale before it was Silverdale. But my grandmother wouldn't let him.
Why is that?
She told him, you have enough property. All you're going to do is work more. So he did. And it was kind of swampy in there at the time. So he didn't buy it. He took his wife's advice and he didn't buy it. But kind of jumping around here, getting back when he sold his property, subdivided it. He also bought a couple of pieces of property, one in Danville and a couple in Oakland. And matter of fact, he sold one to, I don't know if it's Bill's Drugs. No, Bill's Drugs was Lafayette. It was another big chain drugstore at the time. I can't remember the name of it.
But again, he was pretty entrepreneurial and getting in on the good prices.
Yeah, when he went to sell this property, and my grandfather was not known for, dressing the part, a pair of overalls and a old capello or hat, as you might know it. He walked into this meeting with that on and one of his old coats, and there was a board of directors on one side, him on the other. And so he had this little notepad, and he had a price on it for the property. And, I don't know what the price was, but he handed it to the lawyer or whoever. And the guy looked over at him and he goes, is this all you want? And he said, that's what I want. And the guy looked at the other one and says, write him a damn check. But my grandfather only knew this is how much he wanted. He didn't really care about anything else. And he was very happy because it was certainly a profit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way he was, pretty simple. This is what I want. You pay that. Everybody's happy. No, there wasn't a lot of negotiation going on, but that's how he kind of did his business. And eventually he sold all his pieces of property And, he kind of kept the money going since he didn't have ranch work and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it made sense. I mean, I wish my dad and his brothers did stuff like that, but they didn't.
Yes.
So where are we?
How long did, do you remember when some of the dates that your family members passed away, your grandparents and...
Yeah, my grandmother was really the first to go, and she passed away right around 1974. The beginning of 74, it could have been even the late part of 73. And then my grandfather, he stayed alive till around, let's see, he went to our wedding, so that was 75. So I think he made it till right around 76, 77. And
okay, well, we can...
he was such a, he didn't have any business being in a house as far as cooking or cleaning or doing anything. So they rented the house, and the flatbed truck, which was the furniture truck, housed his chair, and every 2 weeks they drive it to a different brother's house where he'd stay. So he'd stay in one for a couple of weeks, and he paid them everybody and everything like that. So, but his chair had to go with him.
Where is the chair?
Who knows? That was
Maybe.
it was pretty old and probably decrepit by
then. Sure.
But nobody kept.
Yeah. And are there any other stories that you were hoping to tell today?
Well, I was kind of finding, seeing how it would go from here, but I've kind of covered quite a bit of it, I think, and maybe straighten out a few things. But once the Lafayette started going, it wasn't as exciting for the old pictures that I had or anything like that. The funniest one that was told around the dinner table way back when is that because of they had to watch their water, and this was true of all ranches and farms, whether it's irrigation or anything, they only bathed on Saturday night. And sounds pretty gross, but that's just the way it was.
Sure.
And my dad was always pissed off because he'd get the water that my two uncles bathed in before he went in. They didn't change the water every time they bathed.
Yeah.
And that's why, and I told this in one of the stories, that's why all those pictures of families were always on Sunday, because they were all, not only our family, but all of them, they were all clean then. You just didn't waste stuff.
Exactly.
Nobody had big lawns and things like that back in the old days.
Right. What do you think about the future of Lafayette? And since you have this incredible perspective of its history.
To be honest with you, I'm extremely disappointed at Lafayette and the people that were running it, because they never allowed and thought of expansion. A lot of them just said, well, let's just leave it the way it is. So, now the biggest problem is Moraga Road. People get off work and a lot of them have to come off the freeway and they go out Moraga Road, and there's a big congestion right there. They never thought past what would happen when more and more people came in and goes from Moraga and everything. Well, they can go out Orinda and go out to Moraga as well, but they didn't really think of the infrastructure of Lafayette very well, in my opinion. As you notice, going down to Lafayette can be pretty damn crowded right now. And
What do you think of all those apartment buildings going up everywhere?
I think they're crazy because here again, money's talking right now, unfortunately. And all the apartments are going in there. That means more people, more cars, more everything. So I guess it brings more tax dollars and everything else to the city, but there's got to be an end to it, because right now it's getting overdeveloped, in my opinion. And when I go down that way, I pretty much stay away from Lafayette. It's just not, I can't relate to it anymore, really. Of course, I was there when there was not much around there.
Okay, that's fair. From your perspective and how long you've been here, how long your family has been in here.
Yeah. Well, it's turning over to be money instead of, values and things like that. And that's why I say it's sad to see all the old businesses go one by one. And then they just put in big complexes with tons of more people and more cars. And yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts today and your memories. And you have been a great help in supporting Lafayette.